If you've been following this entire series, chances are you've probably given this episode's thumbnail a bit of a double take. Because why would this particular car feature so highly for me? Now, the brand makes sense, because I've talked about Panoz before. They are my absolute favourite racing team. I would even support them instead of Cadillac or Spiker or Pagani or Maserati even, because I love them as a racing team so much. But this one doesn't really make as much sense, at least to someone who doesn't know my taste in cars. Because something like the Abruzzi or a GTR1 or the LMP, which of course did feature on the list, they make sense. Those are the kind of Panoz models, especially the GTR1, that a lot of people love. It's the obvious choice. And even in the Esperante range, which is this vehicle more specifically than the GTR1, which tends to get called the Esperante, but it's not really, not technically, this is the true Esperante, the road-going sports car. This is the bread and butter of Panoz. This is how they make their money on a production scale. And it's their Porsche, essentially. In fact, to some degree, the Panoz Esperante is America's Porsche. It's a front-engine, rear-wheel drive alternative, but still, it has a very European visual style with the smoother, rounder bodywork, the slightly quirky appearance of some Italian cars, like Maseratis once again, which could be why I love it as well. I love a bit of oddball, but it combines that with American power. Now, the Esperante, in its higher forms, could still potentially make sense to make someone's favourites list, say a GTLM for instance, or some of the extremely high-performance speedster versions that they've made relatively recently. But this one? Why do I feature this one? Because for those who are unfamiliar, this is the base model. This is the original Esperante in its slowest and least powerful form. Well, that in itself isn't too much of a surprise if you have watched other episodes of my top 50, because I've said it a number of times, I often like the original version of a particular car because you can see it completely uncluttered from any other visual style. It doesn't have body kits and intakes and wings. You can just see the pure, simple, smooth essence of its design. That's why my Koenigsegg of choice would be the original, the CC8S. It's completely devoid of carbon fibre, two-tone, chin splitters, wings, none of that. It's the pure essence of Koenigsegg. Now, with some brands, I don't feel that way. Pagani, for instance, the Zonda F is my favourite version of their range, not the original. But with most, I do prefer the original, and for me that's definitely the case here. Now, this one actually occupies not just a very high place on the list, but in its own way, this is actually a number one car. Because although it's 11th on this list, which in itself is extremely high for a car like this is my favourite sports car in the world. Now that is a sort of weird statement to make, probably, to many people. I doubt that many people would put the Panoz Esperante as their favourite sports car, but if you think about it, and if you think back over the previous episodes in this series, I don't feature many sports cars. In fact, the only one that comes to mind so far was the MG. The SVR, which was way back in the list. And even that, you could make an argument, is more of a super sports car than a pure sports car. This is a pure traditional sports car. And what I mean by that is a two-door, two-seater, ragtop, usually V8, but doesn't have to be, with about 300 to 400 horsepower. That, to me, is a quintessential sports car. Something like a Corvette, or a Viper, especially the early ones, or a Porsche 911, or a TVR, a BMW Z4 even, something like that. They are traditional ideas of a sports car. And of course the specs can vary. You can have 200 horsepower, 500. There's a certain limitation either way, of course, but that's the essence of a sports car. And in that kind of category, nothing comes close for me to this one. If I had my choice of any sports car, I would most definitely choose the Panoz Esperante, and specifically in this original standard form. Now, for those who are maybe less familiar with the production Esperante, because plenty of people know about the GTR1, which, thanks to Gran Turismo, is often known as the Esperante, even though that's not accurate, this one is a much more traditional idea of a sports car. It uses Ford power, a Mustang engine, 4.6 litre V8, around 350 horsepower if memory serves, Performance-wise, you're looking at about 160-ish miles per hour, 0 to 60, about 5 seconds or just under. So again, very traditional sports car stuff, and I would say definitely America's answer to a Porsche 911. Very much so, and I would say more so actually than a Corvette or a Viper, because a Corvette or a Viper are kind of too mainstream. And although you could say that Porsches are as well, Porsches do have a little bit more of an exotic flair to them, in that European way. Panoz does as well, because even though it's an American brand, the Esperante definitely has a very European flair to its design. It's much curvier, much more bubbly looking, kind of like a TVR as well, actually. It's a very similar car to something that TVR would make. There are some very similar visual styles in this car, and even more so, you could say the GTLM version to something like a TVR Tuscan or a Chimera, which I also love, just not necessarily enough to put them on my top 50. And the similarities between the two are very interesting. They are very, very well-matched cars, and technically the Chimera is a better rival for the Esperante than a Porsche 911. But the Porsche is the obvious choice, and it's just one of those cars that I love. I love the Esperante, and the fact that it's such an attainable car, which it really shouldn't be, because those who maybe haven't looked up this car before, you can buy these for remarkably attainable prices. Now, it's not cheap, of course not, but you can buy this original Esperante in around the $25,000 to $30,000 region, which, if you think about it, is pretty incredible value for something as rare and as exclusive and as, I would say, exquisite as a Panoz. That's amazing value to get a sports car that isn't going to necessarily scare much else these days, but certainly isn't slow, and you can have a whole lot of fun in. That's a great price. Plus, although I've said it a number of times on the channel, and doubtless I'll say it again, I'm not a fan of the Mustang as a range. I am, however, a big fan of the Mustang engine. It's, I would say, one of the best sounding V8s ever made, in various forms. The GT by Citroën uses one, and I think that car sounds absolutely incredible. There are, in fact, videos on YouTube that I've even commented on, which you can hear it starting up, and it sounds amazing. Others too, which have also used Mustang power or Ford power. The Saleen S7 as well sounds fantastic, and this one does also. Not quite as raw as those other cars, but great nonetheless. If I had my choice of any sports car to actually own, this would definitely be it. And to be honest, as much as I love TVRs or the Tesla Roadster and some others too, none of them come close. This is most definitely my number one choice of sports car, and that is more than enough to put it at number 11 in my overall favourites list. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, we are, in the next episode, moving into the top 10. Real serious territory, and of course you guys will be able to, if you've seen my other countdowns as well, probably be able to predict some of them that will be in there, not necessarily where they'll be, but that they will be. But that's it for this pick. Of course, you can check out all of the previous episodes by clicking through at the end, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.